Hi, I'm Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to thank everybody for letting me speak here tonight. I'd like to thank Stephanie for getting me on the menu here, and for my sponsor, Glenn, for introducing me to this meeting. For me, first with alcohol, first it was fun, then it was fun with problems, and then eventually it was just problems. And because of this program, I celebrated 1 year sobriety in November last year. And I actually got to take thank you. I actually got to take a chip at this meeting in front of some friends who are here today, and I thank all you guys so much for being here. My wife, who's also here with our 5-month-old son today. And, this program has given me the coolest thing ever, which is that I can say that my son's going to have a sober dad. And I think that's awesome. So before I get into my story, this program has given me so much already. I'd like to start with a little quick side story. I mentioned that I took my year in November a couple months ago, and during that, we celebrated. There was a little small get-together at my sponsor's house, and I was able to see everybody that I've kind of gone on this journey with. And I got a couple cards, like congratulatory cards. And one of the cards I got was from my boy Adrian over here, and it included a little a thank you or a congratulatory note, and then also a gift card to Olive Garden in there. And it was so cool because I was able to, we have a 6-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old daughter at home, and I took that Olive Garden gift card and I took my 4-year-old daughter on a little daddy-daughter date. Yeah, and it was awesome because we dressed up really nice, like we're going to prom or something like that. We get all dressed up. We go out to Olive Garden. It's her first time. Like, she gets to order from the waiter. I'm telling her about the endless breadsticks and all that cool stuff at Olive Garden, and she's all pumped up about it. Yeah. We're sitting there, and she's choosing her size. She's choosing her chicken fingers and all that kind of stuff, and talking to the waiter. And I like to think that I'm telling her what it's like to be at a restaurant and how you should behave yourself and all that kind of stuff. But, I had this aha moment when I was there at the restaurant because, man, in the past, anytime I would go out to things like that, to any activity, out and about, I was always thinking about, where's the bar at? Maybe I can sneak over to the bathroom and grab a quick shot on the way. Or maybe I can take a couple of shots before I go, or before I get in the car. Or, maybe I can bring something into my pocket to make this a little bit more fun, you know what I mean? And I was always doing that, no matter if it was going to a dinner, if it was going to socialize with friends. And by the end of my drinking, I was doing that just to go to the grocery store. It was crazy. But, because of this program, I realized I was fully there at Olive Garden. We were talking to each other. I was listening to what she had to say. We were talking about her day, talking about what's going on in her life. And, that's all I've ever wanted my entire life, was the ability to be present, to be able to enjoy what life is giving me. And I used to think that I needed to drink or needed to use to be able to experience that. But I didn't need any of that stuff. When I was there, that was the main course. That was all I needed. And it just felt awesome. So, the program has given me that along with the gift card. And, that was super cool. But I guess I'll kind of start now back with my story. I grew up in a family where drinking wasn't really around at all. To be honest with you, I didn't see my parents drink at all until I was over 21. I kind of have the common story of having my first few drinks when I was in high school, then binge drinking on the weekend with some high school friends and doing that whole thing and, kind of slowly getting into it, I guess you could say. But a unique thing about me is that when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, I started playing ice hockey. And I grew up playing hockey. By the time I was 12 or 13, I was traveling all around the U.S. and Canada, and it was a huge part of my life. But if you think about hockey and hockey players, as you know, not many hockey players look like me. So it was kind of, early on in my life, I kind of started to deal with in my mind, deal with the issues of fitting in. All I ever wanted was to fit in somewhere. And I felt like when I was at school, I didn't fit in. Then I go to hockey practice, I don't fit in. And you know what? It was tough on me, man. I was a little kid, and I didn't really know how to handle it. A lot of the time I was alone, either far away from home or, I was at school, or I was in situations where I didn't really have anyone to back me up, I didn't know what to do, or I didn't know how to defend myself, I guess you could say. And sometimes the racism was pretty bad, and a lot of times, I just felt completely alone. And by the time I got into college, that sense of discomfort completely followed me, So around that time when I was, 17, 18, I found alcohol as a way to kind of numb that and also to fit in, temporarily, go to a party like, hey, you guys are drinking, I can drink too. Or, hey, you guys like to take shots, oh, let's do it, I'm in, there's no differences here, kind of it's all good. And Needless to say, by the time I finished college, I had left with some pretty expensive habits from drinking and using and doing all that kind of stuff because I just wanted to fit in with people. I thought if I was using, drinking with everybody, then, hey, I'm part of the crew. It's all good. What's the problem? And yeah, man, looking back at it, it was pretty much binge drinking from the start. I went to school in Arizona where they have a rule, if anyone's been out there or lived out there, it's called an MIP. If you get arrested or if you get caught out and about drunk and you're under 21, you get an MIP. It's like your body is a container. So, they call it a minor in possession. And when I was out there, I got an MIP every single year until I turned 21. I was 18, when I was 19, when I was 20. And you would have thought, like, looking back, that's probably a red flag. But to me, I was just like, oh, this is just the price of doing business. Like, you pay the fine, you do the classes that they make you do, you do whatever, and you get through it and you're back to drinking. I was literally drinking as soon as I walked out of the class. And, it's that complete insanity that I was stuck in, man. And again, though, I just thought it was normal. I thought everyone did this to get away from their problems, We all have problems, and this is what we do to handle them. But the next step of my life, I got out of college, and I was fortunately recruited to this corporate company where they kind of did like a big recruiting college hire program. And so they bring me in, and I'm part of this group of 15 people, and we're going through this training experience. They take us out to Houston, and they put us in a hotel for 2 months. And at this point, I'm supposed to be a working professional. I'm no longer a hockey player, no longer a college kid, but those party habits stuck with me, They really stuck with me. Nothing had changed at all, just the location. Nothing in my mind had changed. And I'd kind of recall like a defining story about my alcoholism. We check into that hotel room in Houston, and I'm with this other guy who's in the same program I am. We're going to be there for a couple months, and we're like, hey, let's go to the grocery store and get some supplies just to, we're going to be here for a while, get some supplies for our hotel room. So we go down to the grocery store. Of course, I get a 1.5 liter bottle of Jack Daniels as part of my groceries, We come back to the room, me and this guy, we each have a drink. I go to bed, he goes back to his room. We start our work week, right? Then like 2 days later, this same friend comes back by my hotel room, and he notices that bottle of Jack empty in the corner. He's like, did you drink all that? And I panicked. This is the first time like someone had actually like indirectly called me out about my drinking, I was just like, no, I actually met another friend out here in Houston, and he's crazy. He came by and he drank it all. I just lied about it. The worst lie ever. You know what I mean? Because I didn't know what to say, and I didn't want to admit it to him, what I was actually doing, drinking throughout the work week, you know what I mean? But that was what the truth was, man. And I look back to that lie that I told that day. That was like a microcosm for how I lived my life for the next 15 years. I would just, namely, push people away and lie to people to isolate myself, and protect my right to drink the way I wanted to drink. I didn't like people clocking my drinks. I didn't like people knowing how much I was drinking, or telling me I shouldn't be drinking as much, or passive-aggressively judging me because bottles were empty, or, I was getting refills and stuff like that. So, that included the church, and eventually, most importantly, included my wife. So by the time I was married, I definitely kept my drinking habits like I mentioned, but the party was long over. And these vices started to get out of control. And one day my wife sat me down and she kind of told me to seek help, or it was going to be clear that she was going to be gone. She already had one foot out of the door and kind of a plan on what she was going to do. But, that warning wasn't enough, man. It wasn't enough to stop. Just like those MIPs I got when I was out in Arizona. It wasn't enough to stop. And by this time, I guess you could say I was like what you would call a functioning alcoholic, even though we know that we don't really function that well when we're on that. And, I had a job. It was paying the bills. I thought I was able to support my family. It was so that my wife didn't have to work, and I thought that's all I needed, like I was winning. So what's the issue for me needing to look on the inside? But everywhere I went, alcohol wasn't too far behind, I knew it was a problem. And for a while, when I was kind of earlier in my career, I was moving around a lot. I was one of those guys moved different cities as part of my job. And I was also one of those guys where whatever the closest liquor store was to my house, I became a regular, I get to know the clerk. I would know who worked there. I knew whose shift it was. I knew all the people. They knew about me, and it happens like clockwork, you know what I mean? And, maybe that was another red flag too, but that's just how it worked for me. Eventually I tried to moderate, got into moderation, which we've all probably given a shot at, but of course it didn't work. Like, for example, I would play on a men's league hockey team. They call it beer league because every game someone would bring a case of beer, and the team would sit in the locker room afterwards, have 1, 2, 3 beers, go on their way. But, I was always that guy that would be sitting there. I'd drink 3 beers or until it was gone, and then I'd be picking up my own, pack on the way home to have my own party in the car as I was driving home. That's just how I operated. It was like I didn't stop drinking until I wanted to stop drinking, until I fell asleep or passed out. Didn't matter if the party was over. Didn't matter if there was anyone drinking with me, I just went at my own speed. And then, I guess it comes to the point where there was one time my wife and I take a trip down to Mexico, and we really got after it on this trip. A friend of ours had a little condo down there, so they invited us down to hang out. We go down to Mexico, and we start just getting after it like how we used to do. Drinking so hard that we end up throwing up in the middle of the night in the guest room of my buddy's condo, and we're cleaning it up, and we're doing laundry at like 2 a.m. to try to hide it. You know what I mean? And just the craziness that comes along with this disease, man. But that's how we were living. That was the price of doing business, and trying to make it so they didn't know that we were over the limit that night. But after that trip, we get back home, and my wife quit drinking. She said she was able to stop, realize what had happened, look in the mirror and stop. I wish I could do that. I couldn't do that, and she's been sober ever since. But, I kept going. In fact, after that trip, as soon as we drove home, the 6-hour drive to get back home, I went straight down to the liquor store and got a 6-pack, because that's all I knew how to do whenever I was feeling uncomfortable or whenever I earned it or did something that deserved it, whether good or bad. That's just how I handled it. So, at that point, though, the light was kind of shone on me because my wife wasn't drinking anymore, and I had to get in the habit of sneaking the drinks and hiding my drinks and doing all that kind of stuff. And you know what, man? Every single day I would wake up and I'd go to the liquor store down the street from my house, and I'd buy like a pint of vodka and a couple tall boys, just enough for the day or just enough for the afternoon. And you might say like, well, why are you just getting that little amount? Why don't you get like the 1.5 liters like you used to do? It's because every single time I went down there, I thought that was going to be my last time drinking. I thought that was going to be my last time walking into that liquor store. I wanted it to be. I told myself it would be. I was sick of hiding, and I was sick of doing that. But just like clockwork, man, every single day the next morning I'd be right back in there, looking at that clerk in the eye again, getting my order. And, there had to be 100 times of this, hey, this is my last day drinking, Brandon. I walk in, get in my car, walk in, go into the liquor store, come back out, only for it to start all over again the next day. And it was that incomprehensible demoralization, man, that just had become a daily habit for me. And it made me feel miserable on the inside every single day. I was losing a battle to myself every day when I did that. And, we eventually had a meeting with a marriage counselor, and it was obvious I was going to have to make a change before, I lost my marriage, lost my family. And I was pretty much scared straight. I had to get the heat off. So I I got to stop drinking. I really have to stop or else I'm done. So, I gritted my teeth, and I made it like almost 3 months, right? Not just kind of struggling through it, I guess you could say. Not doing AA, not in the program at all, not talking to anybody. And all of a sudden, my friend has a wedding down in Mexico. So here I go, down to Mexico again. And it's at one of these all-inclusive resorts, And I'm like, all right. And I'm thinking in my head, my alcoholic brain, I'm like, okay, well, I've made it 3 months. And maybe if I can get through this wedding weekend at this, all-inclusive resort, then if I could do that, then I'm cured, and I can sail off into the sunset. It's like that's my Super Bowl, Just one more battle to get through, right? So we go down there, we get down to check into the hotel and everything like that. And, everybody's in town for his wedding, and everybody's kind of hanging out in the restaurant area, and people are saying hi, and, it's a big group of people. And it's cool. I'm hanging out with my wife. We're both not drinking. I'm just drinking sodas or whatever, talking to old friends and chatting with people. Not really a big deal. Made it through that night. No problems. Then the next morning comes, which is the day of the wedding. And I think me and my wife maybe had a little bit of an argument about something silly, and I didn't eat much breakfast and end up just going to the gym, get a little workout in. And then here's where the alcoholic mind starts working, man. I'm walking back from the gym to my hotel room, strolling along, and I see this open bar right there, right on the beach, tons of open seats. The bartender is sitting there not doing anything, and it just sucked me in, man. I went and sat down. I knew everything was included, so there's no receipts I was going to have to hide. Nothing like that, So I go sit down, I order a Jack and Coke. There goes my 3-month streak, but it got worse. I get a Jack and Coke, I'm drinking it, and before I'm even done with it, the bartender gives me another one. I'm just sitting there by myself. That's how I like to drink, right? No one's clocking my drinks. No one's telling me, hey, you're going too fast, whatever. It's all good, I'm just hanging out drinking for free, I thought, so no one knows. And that's how I like to drink, man. I like to drink alone, I like to drink on my own speed. So, I just keep hitting these drinks, have 5 or 6 or 7, who knows. By the time I stood up from that bar, though, I was blitzed, man. Done. And I somehow stumble my way over to my buddy's wedding ceremony. Don't remember it at all, even though I'm in a couple pictures with him. And get through the ceremony, and then, I stumble my way back to the hotel room and just pass out in my room. Completely slept through the wedding reception. Missed his reception, missed the party, missed the dinner, missed all of it. I'd gone all the way down to Cancun for this thing, and I missed it, man, because I was drinking Jack and Cokes. And I'm just like, man, that feeling. When I woke up in the hotel room, it was scary for sure that I had done that, but it was just mostly shameful, Like, I couldn't believe, look at what alcohol did to me, I have truly no control over this thing. As much as I just did 3 months, I thought I did, I have no control over this thing. That wasn't my plan to miss the wedding, and it just made me do that. I'm going to have to make amends to this guy and to the bride the next day. And, of course, I have some friends texting me, where are you at? What's going on? And, man, those text messages and all that stuff just cut like a dagger, because I knew it was all my fault, There's no one else I could blame about it. And once that happened, man, I just sat in that room and I spent about an hour, like we do, just trying to blame anyone but myself for that, including my wife. Sorry about that. But, I'm saying, it was my wife's fault for starting the argument that morning, or it's the hotel's fault for not having any food for me to eat for breakfast, or, just being crazy, just thinking about anything and everything that would make it not my fault. But I was just digging my shame spiral deeper as I was doing that, because on the inside, I knew it was all my fault, I knew I chose to sit down. I knew I chose to keep drinking. I knew I chose to do all of that. I knew I wanted to do it, even worse. So, that night in that hotel room, I just wanted to run and jump off of the hotel balcony that we were staying. I felt so that was my rock bottom. I didn't see any possible way how I was going to be able to get control of my life, I knew that I couldn't do it on my own, talking about step 1. But that's where God started to work, and that's where I began my relationship with God, and he brought me out of that dark place and got me to the place that I'm at now. But the way I did it, I gave a call to a couple of guys I had met when I half-heartedly attended an AA meeting a couple weeks before the wedding. Glenn, who's now my sponsor, and he's here tonight, along with Billy, who's also here tonight. And you guys have been so great to me. I can't tell you enough. You helped save my life. I know I've told you that before, but the very next day when I got back home, when we flew back from the wedding, I met with Glenn and John for lunch, and I went with them to a Tuesday night meeting. And I've been going to that meeting ever since. It's where I met Frankie, met Adrian, met a lot of the other guys that are in here. And like Frankie said, man, that meeting has completely saved my life, and the fellowship that I've grown from it, along from my Tustin Noon meeting, those relationships have completely saved my life. But, when I was in these meetings, I started to listen for the similarities, not the differences. And I finally in these meetings felt like I was at home. I felt like I fit in, going back to the start where I was always looking for that. In these meetings was the first time I ever started feeling like I did, because I would hear someone share something and I was like, yeah, I totally get that, or I've done that, or, maybe it doesn't look exactly the same, but I felt what you're feeling, I get it. And I've never felt more comfortable in a group setting than I have in AA. And then I eventually started doing my steps, and things got better almost immediately, I think by the end of the 2nd or 3rd month, I was on that pink cloud, and I was just starting to see a better way of living in all aspects of my life. Steps 1 through 3 were pretty quick for me after that wedding. I knew I was powerless over alcohol, and I couldn't solve this issue by myself. I had that gift of desperation, I guess you could say. I needed that gift of desperation. And steps 4 and 5 completely changed my life. I started to see the reason why I needed to drink, the reason why I, had such a difficulty with being in uncomfortable situations. And, it was pretty scary listening out step 4, all my defects of character, all the terrible things I've done. But man, step 5, the following step, it really allowed me to forgive myself for all that stuff and to understand what the core was from where all that stuff came from. And I started living with principles finally, mainly honesty, humility, integrity. And, I was so far away from each one of those things that it's crazy, you know what I mean? And to live my life by those now, rigorous honesty, it feels like a superpower, I can't be hurt anymore almost. And before AA, I couldn't be uncomfortable, Anything from getting challenged by my boss at work to do a project or to do something harder than I thought I knew how to do, or making a difficult parenting decision, or disciplining the kids, or even just being bored. I literally could not be uncomfortable without numbing that feeling with booze. And for me, I realized I had never really built up true self-esteem. That's what I learned from doing the steps, especially steps 8 and 9. But through doing the steps, I finally got some self-esteem, especially doing step 9 and reaching out to people that I'd harmed in the past. That was terrifying. But, doing it, I finally gathered some actual self-esteem, and the responses I got from people were encouraging, and I actually felt like I could look myself in the mirror. Like John says, I can stand square-shouldered and talk to people without trying to cower down and hide all the things that I have inside that I'm trying to hide from people, but mainly myself. My life in sobriety is so much more now than I thought it would be. When I first came in here, I thought I just needed to stop drinking, needed to stop taking those trips to the liquor store to start living a happy life. But when I stopped drinking, I feel like it's like I cleared off like a really messy desk. And now I can actually see what's going on in my life, what's important, what I do need to work on, and how I should do that. And I've had a couple aha moments, like I mentioned with the Olive Garden story earlier. But a lot of it for me, thank you, comes with my relationship with my wife and kids. Before, when I would be hanging out with the kids, I was that guy that would take a shot before taking them to the park, or I would be hanging out with them playing video games and sneaking a drink out in the garage and just self-medicating myself because I thought I needed to. I thought that's what I needed to do to make it, so I was present, funny enough. But, anytime I was doing that, I would think not just with the kids, but, doing anything good in my life. Hey, I'm being a good dad right now, or I'm being a good husband right now doing this for my wife, or I'm being a good employee doing this extra work for my boss. I really earned a drink after this, didn't I? What should I do? Jack, or should I do martini? Should I do vodka? What's that going to be? And all of that thinking used to just completely take me out of the present moment, always. Whether it was something good or something bad, I was either thinking about getting drunk or drinking. But it's not always the time you're drunk, man. It's the time that you're sober and you're thinking about getting drunk that takes you out of that present moment, is what I learned, All I ever wanted to do was be present, and I was running away from it all the time, thinking that I needed a substance to get there. And even though alcohol is promoted as this great social lubricant like we see in the marketing, we see in the commercials, alcohol completely robs us of our ability to develop meaningful relationships, I found, Everything I had was surface level, or the buddies that I had were just drinking buddies that I would see them one night at a party or meet them at a bar, and I'd save their number. Oh, yeah, man, blah, blah, blah. And by the next day, I wouldn't even know who they were. You know what I mean? And if I saw them, there was nothing I had in common with them, because all we did was drink. That's the only way we were able to interact with each other. And man, alcohol really just affected my ability to be present. I was there physically, but I was never actually engaged mentally with what was going on, And now sobriety has given me moments that I didn't even know I was missing. Like the Olive Garden moment. A couple months into my sobriety, I had one of these moments when I was playing hockey with my girls in the garage. And I was kind of teaching them how to skate, and they're, slapping the puck around. We're having fun in the garage. And I just thought about during that moment, I was like, again, kind of like the Olive Garden thing. I'm completely into this. I'm not waiting for it to be over. I'm not, patting myself on the back hey, you're being a good dad. Okay, now you've really earned your chance to go do something that you really want to do afterwards, That was gone. And I was totally in the present moment. I was totally engaged, which I've been searching for my entire life. I finally had somewhere where I fit in, where I was needed, and where I enjoyed being. And that was one of the coolest things in my sobriety journey. These little gifts that keep being given to me as I go along, little aha moments, that pieces of my life that I was totally missing before sobriety, and now I get a chance to enjoy them for free. All I had to do was put down the drink, start doing my steps. But life keeps lifing, for sure. I guess I just have a little bit of serenity through it all now. Last month, I was unfortunately laid off from my job. They did layoffs, and I got a call one morning. They invited me to a larger team call. I pull into it, and there's me and about 70 other people on this call. And there's this woman who I've never met before. She's leading the call, and she's like, hey, just to let you guys know, unfortunately, your positions have been eliminated, and the company's going in a different direction. Which is, obviously not great timing for us. We just had a baby. We're a single income household. And I mean, to be honest with you, when I really think about it, it can make me scared to death, But going to step 11 here, this is God's will for my life. And if God was able to bring me out of the darkest place ever when I was in that hotel room, and to bring me to where I am today, then God's got a plan for me. He didn't bring me this far just to let me come this far. He's not going to let me just stop here. And with sobriety, I've been able to rebuild trust with my wife. Our relationship is so much better now than it's even ever been. We communicate with each other the way we should. The 10th step comes in handy for sure, making amends daily. Sometimes it takes me a little bit longer than daily to make those amends. But I try my best to make amends as soon as I can, If one of us is getting triggered or if there's frustrations that we have with each other, we let the other person know, and it prevents a big fallout like it used to be in the past. Man, our fights used to last for weeks, for months, just because one of us didn't understand why we're making the other person upset. She's back to being my best friend again. But last week we had a little bit of an argument that I had to make an amends for. Thank you. I'm going through the whole thing with the job, right? And I'm like trying to look at applications I should do, and I'm planning out my week. Like, all right, I'm going to talk to this person. I'm going to apply here, apply there. And as I'm preparing for the week, she asked me to do something pretty simple. I think it was take one of our daughters home from school or something like that. And I just snapped, I was like, come on, don't you see all the stuff I'm doing? And it was my alcoholic thinking again. It's me. How am I feeling? How does this make me feel? And I'm so thankful that I have this program, because once I was able to calm down, took a little time, but once I was able to make an amends to her. And those are skills I just didn't have before. I didn't know how to apologize to people, and how to genuinely make an amends to people, and how to think about anyone other than myself. I thought thinking about yourself is the way you're supposed to be, but this program taught me otherwise. I'm so thankful for that. So going through this whole job thing, I have a strange sense of serenity through it. It's like the 11th step. I feel like God is doing for me what I couldn't do for myself once again. If I'm being honest, when I was in this job, that I just had, I didn't really like it. I was kind of like plateaued. It was just comfortable. I had the paycheck coming in every couple of weeks, and I was there. But I knew that I didn't want to do that. Like, I knew I actually wanted something different. I just didn't have the guts to do anything about it. You know what I mean? It was just too easy to be there. And now I just realize that, hey, this is God's will for me, and I'm just praying for, His will to be done, and for me to have the strength to carry that out. So instead of waking up every day and doing I got to do 100 job applications, or I have to, do all this stuff until I get at least a lead, then I can calm down and go spend time with the kids or go watch a movie or something like that. I've been kind of living these past few weeks with a weird sense of excitement about what's coming next, honestly, because I know that I'm going to enter into that opportunity, whatever it is, as the best version of myself. And it's all because of this program. It was also really cool earlier this week when I got a call from a recruiter that my sponsor's daughter, I think, put us in touch with each other. And the guy calls and he's like, hey, I'm so-and-so. And we start talking. He goes, hey, I heard you're a friend of Bill W. I'm a friend of Bill W. too. I was like, oh, that's awesome. We're talking to each other, and he goes, I might not have something exactly for you, but I think my friend does. He's kind of more up your alley, and he's a friend of Bill W's too. It's like, wow, that's awesome. We're everywhere, He can't get away from us. But, how I stay sober today is I just try to practice the 12th step at any opportunity I can. I've offered to sponsor a couple guys and, be there for them if they're ready to start to get sober, start to go through the steps, whatever way I can be of service, taking responsibilities or, doing things in my meetings like being the secretary or being the coffee guy and just stuff that makes me of service. I've also started a YouTube channel documenting my journey to sobriety and just kind of talking through how it's worked for me, the sober pursuit, which has been pretty awesome. And it's just a life of kind of thinking through how I can best serve other people. And I used to never think like that, The serving other people was always such a challenge for me. I was never sure exactly how to do it. But I guess kind of coming towards the end here, I just like to close with, my worst days sober are still much better than my best days pretending I was okay. I had no idea how I was ever going to be able to get out from all the habits that I'd created for my life and how I'd ever move past all of the shame I'd accumulated and all the lying and hiding and all these things I've been doing. But I didn't come to AA because I was willing. I came because I was desperate. The willingness came later. And I borrowed hope from this room until I had some hope of my own. There's a quote that I like to think about when it comes to my sobriety, and it's from the book The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. And it talks about a boy who's riding his horse, and he comes to a forest with a dense fog over it. And the boy goes, "I can't see a way through." And the horse says, "Well, can you see your next step?" The boy says, "Yeah." "Then just take that," says the horse. And my advice to anyone who's new out there tonight, who's feeling like I was, that you're facing an insurmountable climb, is just to take the next step. Don't worry about what the full journey will look like. God's going to take care of that. Just take the next right step. So if you're new tonight, or you're sitting out there wondering if this program works, I'm living proof of it. I'm not special, and I definitely didn't come in willing. Glenn can tell you that. But I did come in desperate. And I didn't understand AA. I didn't even know how it was going to work for me. But what I did was simple, man. I just kept coming back. I listened. I got honest for one of the first times in my life. And I did what was suggested, even though I didn't feel like it. I went to meetings. I shared. I stayed afterwards. I got there early. I talked to people. And if it can work for me, it can work for you too. And you don't have to do that alone. You don't have to do this alone. We're all in it here for you together. That's all I got tonight, guys. Thank you to everyone for letting me share, and thank you to AA for my sobriety.